Hello, baseball fans, and welcome back to another video. I bet you didn't think we were going to be here, but here we are in another win for the Cubs, 6-0. The Cubs proved Brandon and I wrong. They did not only just score in the first few innings, they scored in a bunch of innings and beat the Brewers 6-0. It is a comeback for the Cubs, and hopefully this is not the end for the Cubs. Hopefully they can clinch the win and kick the Brewers out. Or maybe the Brewers will come back now that they're going to be back on their home turf in Milwaukee. It is really a toss up here. And Brandon, I know you and I had this conversation of there's this Cubs curse that they come back and then they kind of poop the bed at the last minute and get everybody's hopes up. But what's your thoughts after this game and what could happen in the near future?
Yeah, I mean, as a Cubs fan, I mean, and obviously to our Cubs fans who are watching, you know how the Cubs work and operate. You know that they have a tendency to get your hopes up, just just to only let you down ultimately. But for our Brewers fans watching, obviously, I mean, this is concerning. I mean, 2-0 lead now evaporated, now sudden death baseball, which and again, the part of the Cubs win being so important beyond just extending the series is that the Brewers used Freddie Peralta in Game 4. I mean, they're out their best starting pitcher. Obviously the Cubs used Matthew Boyd, who had a great game through I think 4 2/3 scoreless innings, really redeemed himself from that Game 1 disaster. But I mean, so regardless of who starts in Game 2, which or Game 5, which we'll get into in an instant. It's going to be a bullpen game for both teams. Obviously, there's an off day in between Game 4 and Game 5 as they travel from Chicago to Milwaukee. It's going to be all hands on deck. It's sudden death baseball. The Cubs were here last week. They've played under this pressure already. The Brewers obviously have not. They had the bye in the wild card round, so maybe in that sense it's edge to the Cubs, but obviously being back on in American Family Field is definitely an advantage for the Brewers, especially since the home team has won all 4 games in this series already. So it's going to be fun. It's I'm glad we're getting a Game 5, but both teams are definitely on working on fumes right now.
Yeah, it's really interesting. I made the comparison a while ago that this is the Cubs really tiring the Brewers out at this point, and that
Mhm.
might be the case here, where we have people really heating up, like Michael Bush, like Ian Happ. Pete Crow Armstrong is kind of still really he's not hot anymore, which is really surprising. It's really a lot of our veteran players at this point when it comes to the Cubs. And as for the Brewers, you still have people like Jackson Chorio and Christian Yelich just kind of holding down the fort. But again, the last game 6-0 was not a good example of the Brewers' strength against the
Mhm.
Cubs. And again, now that they have a day of rest and they'll come back, hopefully for the Brewers, they can kind of turn it around here. Again, being it sudden death, the
Yeah.
hope is being back on your home turf. Tensions are pretty high right now.
Yeah, for sure. I mean, obviously, margin for error is evaporated for both teams. It's worth pointing out, obviously, that the Cubs have scored in the first inning of every single game in this series. The Brewers had scored in the first inning of the first 3 games, obviously, before getting shut out in Game 4. So, again, we expect probably early fireworks right now. Given where things stand, it sounds like Shota Imanaga is going to take the start for the Cubs. Obviously, he's going to have a very short leash. His tendency to give up home runs proved to be problematic in Game 2. It was problematic against the Padres in the wild card series. If he gets the start, Craig Counsell will be very, very tight with, as soon as trouble arises, Imanaga is going to be out of the game and the Cubs bullpen is going to take over, which isn't a huge issue right now because Aaron Savali, Michael Soroka, Ben Brown to an extent, Colin Ray, all those long relievers are going to be, relatively fresh, and they'll be ready to pitch multiple innings if needed. So, in that sense, advantage to the Cubs. Obviously, the Brewers were not exactly sure who the starter is going to be. It sounds like maybe Jacob Misiorowski, but again, obviously, rookie pitcher. He's had his command issues. If he does get the start, Pat Murphy will certainly have him on a short leash as well. So, it's going to be a bullpen game, a lot of pitching changes. Again, it's just when you're working in sudden death baseball where it's winner take all, the margin for error doesn't exist. As soon one team gets out to a lead, I mean, and they start getting to their better arms in the bullpen, it starts getting really really difficult, for a team to make a comeback as the outs start, sort of coming off the board.
I think the closing remarks I have here are both Murphy and Council both have had 4 games to really kind of figure their
Yeah.
bullpen out at this point, and both have kind of there have been good games and bad games when it comes to the bullpen. I have a lot to say about Shota Imanaga that I'm going to kind of keep my mouth zipped about right now. And I have plenty to say about the Brewers bullpen, but we're going to save it for another day. Both front offices have had a lot of time to see what has gone right and what has gone wrong in these past 4 games. And like you said, both are going to keep their bullpens on very short leashes. If anything goes wrong, they're going to put in somebody else. And in the first 2 or 3 games, that was not the case. We saw it with Shota Imanaga in the first, game that he stepped up in. He made a lot of errors and they were not pulling him out because they're like, look, he's Shota Imanaga. He might come back around. He very much did not. And so now
Yeah.
he's made this reputation for himself in the playoffs. It's the same with the Brewers. So we'll see what happens. Do you have any closing remarks as we come into the final round here between the Brewers and the Cubs?
It might as well be the final death. Obviously, whoever loses goes home. Yeah, I mean, look. Obviously, Cubs and Brewers fans are not the best of friends. It's just the nature of division, division rivals playing playoff baseball for the first time ever against each other, at least since they became division rivals. And so, it's just this is fun. Like obviously the Cubs winning these 2 games, gives them hope. Obviously, we talked about that already, what that could mean. But it's just, like this is what it's all about. Like this is, it's tough to play a 162 game season and then it all comes down to just 9 innings. If it goes to extras, maybe longer. But, it's a situation where, it's really, you kind of have to throw like obviously you can't throw scouting reports out the window, but this is where like leadership and like that championship DNA and all those intangibles that people talk about that really don't seem all that important, like during the regular season. That's where this comes into play. Like that's when having for the Cubs, Dansby Swanson, a guy who's won a World Series with the Braves, that's where he matters. That's where, he's really going to be able to pull the team aside and say, like, hey, like, this is what we need to do to get ready. Obviously, the Brewers are a younger team. They have obviously a lot of great players who have been in the postseason before, but maybe, not as many, maybe championship veterans. So we'll see what happens on that front. Obviously, it's sudden death baseball. Anything can happen. But as always, we'd love to hear your thoughts on this topic. How you feeling going into Game 5? Who do you think has the edge? Obviously, the Brewers are at home. The Cubs have probably a little bit more rested of a bullpen, at least with the long relievers. So who do you think has the advantage? Let us know your thoughts in the comments. And as always, we'll try to respond to everyone.